All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, A Comic Adventure into the Post-Quantum Realm. So my name is Ryan Sanders, and today we are going to dive into a topic that I know is top of mind for many of you, and that is quantum readiness. I'm also joined by none other than our Chief Security Officer, Chris Hickman, who is here to offer his expertise and his insights, and also just share perspective based on many of the conversations that he's been having with our partners and customers on this topic. So thanks, Chris, for joining. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Great to be here. I truly love this series and participating in it.
Yeah, awesome. And the reason we're here is really because the volume of questions and inquiries that we're getting in this area has really grown. We actually audit this internally at Keyfactor, and over the past year, it's grown tenfold in terms of the conversations we're having. So there's certainly a lot of awareness that's coming around this topic, but everybody does come with a different level of urgency and awareness. So the questions can range really anything from just understanding the risk, like why is quantum computing a threat to security, all the way down to questions about implementation, like which algorithm should we be implementing to protect ourselves against the threat of quantum computing. So no matter where you're coming from today, no worries. We will take it one step at a time, and starting with the risks that quantum computers pose, all the way down to the steps that you as an organization need to take to start preparing. So now you might be asking, where does a comic book fit into all of this? So back in 2021, I was scrolling through some PKI subreddits on a Friday night, as most people do. That's a normal thing, right? And what I found was honestly just hilarious. It was everyone from sysadmins to PKI architects, and they were on there venting about either their love or hate relationship with PKI. The next day, I jumped on a call with Chris Hickman and said, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we created some content around PKI problems? And then Chris said, hey, I think I know a guy who could help us sketch this up in a comic. And then a month later, volume 1 of our comic was born, and it turned out to be a hit. So since then, we've been asked to do a volume 2 many times, actually, Chris. I know when we're at RSA on the show floor, we've been asked to do a second volume. But there really wasn't anything meaningful that we could think of until really just the volume of, again, questions that we were getting around this topic just grew significantly and surfaced to a level where we felt we needed to create a volume 2. So once again, jumped on a call with Chris. He knew exactly what I wanted to do. So we're back with volume 2. This one is inspired by the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So volume 2 serves up some practical insights to help you better understand and drive awareness and prepare for this transition ahead of us. And of course, we threw in a dash of hyperbole and humor to keep things interesting. And that's exactly what we hope to do today. So our goal over the next 45 minutes or so is to really shed some light on the existential threat to current cryptography that lies ahead of us, and what it's going to take for organizations like yours to make that transition to new quantum resilient standards. And again, some of those practical steps that can help you get there. But instead of running through a bunch of, dull PowerPoint slides, we figured, hey, why don't we actually bring Matt Erkhart, the artist behind our comic book, onto the webinar so he can sketch on the fly and really bring our conversation to life in a new way. So thank you, Matt, for joining. How's it going?
That's going great. Having a good time.
Awesome. And then while we're on the topic of comics, got to ask a critical question for both of you. Matt, Chris, why don't we start with you, Matt? What is your favorite superhero or villain?
Favorite superhero? It's a complicated question. Story-wise, there's one answer, but art-wise, which is kind of the focus of today, my favorite to draw superhero is probably Spider-Man.
I could see that.
Very, very svelte, coolest costume design in comics history.
Nice. Totally agree. Chris, what about you?
And sort of sticking with the Sony / Marvel universe, I'm going to have to go back to Iron Man. I love the character, being a tech guy. There's something about that character that I'm just drawn to. But I have been accused of being the Hulk every once in a while, and that has nothing to do with my muscularity. So that's a close second. So,
well, I'm glad I've never seen that side of you, Chris. But Tony Stark, that's a controversial one. I'm pretty sure we could have a whole other webinar on this topic, but mine is nice.
It's starting to separate a little bit from my favorite list, but we won't get into
that. Yeah, mine's nice and easy. It's Captain America. I'm pretty boring that way, but it's a classic. So Gotta love it. But all right, let's get into it. So in a minute, I will pass it over to screen share to Matt, and he's going to get started on the drawing. But before I do that, just a few quick things that we're going to go through today. So first, we'll start out with a recap of PKI problems that we covered in Volume 1, because I think it's important to recognize that even though we've got significant challenges ahead of us, it's important to understand that that doesn't really change the fact that you already face challenges and frustrations today, right, when it comes to managing public key infrastructure and digital certificates. Next, we will cover why the time to act is now and why hitting snooze on your quantum safe strategy is no longer an option. And then we'll get into some of those critical steps that you've got to take to prepare, beginning with setting your game plan and then building awareness all the way from the server room to the boardroom around the importance of quantum readiness. And then lastly, of course, we'll round it out with our favorite buzzword, which is crypto agility, and why that's important to play the long game rather than a set and forget strategy. So with that, Matt, I will let you take over the screen. Feel free to take control. And while you are doing that, just a couple of quick reminders for our audience here. This is a webinar where we really rely on your engagement. So if you've got questions for us or even thoughts that you want to contribute to the conversation, we encourage you to join the discussion, right? Use the question tab you can find on your Bright Talk window there. We'd love for you to ask your questions, engage with your comments as we go. Feel free to drop those in at any time. Don't feel like you need to wait to the end, and we will try to incorporate those into the conversation as we carry forward. And then secondly, be sure to check out the attachments tab after today's webinar. And that's where you're going to find a link to grab your own copy of the comic book and a few other resources that we've got in there for you. So with that, Matt, it looks like you're ready to go. So let's get started on the first topic. So we're going to talk about PKI problems. And just for some background, I think it's important to recognize the role of PKI in modern cybersecurity. So Chris, I know you've been working with in this space for like 15 plus years, right? You've seen the role of PKI evolve over time. So could you maybe speak to where that fits in the organization and how that's kind of changed, what use cases you see now that maybe you didn't see 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, so you're being kind at 15 years. It's every gray hair tells a different story, and I've got lots of gray hairs for the amount of time I've been doing this. But yeah, the reality is that PKI has fundamentally evolved from a very specific set of use cases, which was sort of VPN access, or when I started doing PKI, I don't think we even had Wi-Fi. Let's put it that way. So there was use cases that developed as technology developed where certificates were just a natural fit. But what's really changed, is the breadth of the different types of devices now that take certificates and rely on certificates. I mean, you've got certs in containers, you got certs in service meshes, you have certs in IoT devices. Your car, it probably has certs in it. It's sort of become one of the more universally accepted ways to do good identity and to establish good trust amongst any kind of connected device. And therefore the use cases have really kind of become endless in a lot of respects. And that's the reality. But with that too, as we know, hashtag PKI problems, the management of it has gotten a little out of control for a lot of organizations as well. And, things happen as the ongoing game of whack-a-mole that a lot of people play, right? Trying to chase down expired certs and things like that. And we're just going to get into a more prevalent space there. So, one good example is up for comment in front of the CAB forum right now is this move to transition to 47-day certs over a period of time. And if we don't have the foundation in place to deal with 398-day certs today, then 47-day certs by 2029, I think it is, are going to really create ongoing operational problems for a lot of organizations. So use cases have changed, but the use cases have expanded. Therefore, the number of certs have expanded. What was originally sort of an easy VPN / TLS type use case now, certs are everywhere. And that's just the reality. Most organizations just don't even know where they are, let alone how they're going to manage them. And we're starting to see the maturation of that space now as people start to address those problems.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think that even probably relates to everyone here. if you're on this webinar, you probably have a very different relationship with PKI depending on who you are. It could be close or distant, love or hate. For some of you, it might be your passion. For others, it might be something that you've just got to do as a part of your job. But I think when we think about the challenges of working with PKI, one of the biggest ones is just a lack of clear ownership around it. Despite the importance of it in cybersecurity, it's one of those things that I think often gets relegated to someone who may have never worked with it before, or like our PKI admin character here, or maybe it's implemented properly, but that person leaves the company and suddenly you're left with a PKI that people don't understand how it was built, how it should be managed and maintained over its lifetime. There's also this aspect of different tools, right? We've got a disparate patchwork of certificate issuers out there. Many organizations leverage a Microsoft-based PKI for their enterprise PKI for some of those basic use cases, which comes with its own set of challenges. But then you've also got other teams using different tools because that Microsoft PKI can't meet their use case. So now suddenly you've got CA-provided tools or cloud-native CAs. We even see CAs built into, you mentioned a couple use cases earlier, in microservices environments, and we see self-signed certificates. So the situation can really get out of control to the point where it looks like on the screen here, not just expired certs, but also certs that are non-compliant or weak or not meeting the policies of the organization. And I think many teams just don't have proper visibility or governance over their PKI and certificate landscape. So yeah, I think it's a human problem as much as it's a technology problem, right, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And most organizations, I mean, the reality is they built PKI in a vacuum to service a particular use case. Because there is an existing PKI, they said, oh, let's just issue certs for this. And look, this will take certs. Let's issue certs for that. With no real policy behind it, with no real sort of thought process to scale, so on and so forth. And the reality is that the number of certs that are being used to secure technology far outweigh the number of certs that are being used from the pure identity side of things. But if you look at a lot of organizations now, your Microsoft example, the Microsoft CA really drove this, right? It became a function of identity in most organizations because it was part of Active Directory versus being a sort of core security service. And that's not to say that that's necessarily bad, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's followed the path of always staying secure, always being able to scale, so on and so forth. And we can all pretty much agree, PKI is a rather niche set of skills, critical in order to be able to make all the right decisions as you go. So I would agree with you there that that leads to the patchwork of technology, but the patchwork of experience and the disparate application of policy across that patchwork just makes it worse. And where do people trip? There's an outage, there's an audit, so on and so forth, and all of those types of functions. And all of a sudden, somebody's got to rethink PKI in a rush, which is never a good time to undertake a sort of foundational type of project.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think the bottom line is that many people feel like this image here is that they're just surrounded by problems. It feels like a game of whack-a-mole. They're really trying to address everything they can, but they don't feel either proper resourced, properly tooled, equipped with the right assets that they need to be able to accomplish that successfully. And yeah, they're generally just struggling to keep up with the speed and the scale of certificates across the business because I think it's funny, like every year is the year that PKI is dead, but then it just keeps growing. It keeps coming up with a new use case, IoT being a new one, workload identities. That's another one that's popped up with the new SPIFFE standard. So there's just continuous growth in the use of PKI and certificates behind an organization's kind of trust infrastructure. And now ahead of us, if we go to the second scene, is really the biggest change to the cryptographic landscape that we have ever seen. I think by cybersecurity standards, RSA and ECC, those are the two public key algorithms that safeguard the internet and communications between essentially everything, as Chris mentioned, web servers, load balancers, microservices, IoT devices. Those have been around for a long time. To their credit, they've stood the test of time, though, right? They've been very strong. They've been useful with growing key sizes over time to ensure that they remain secure. But with advancements in quantum computing, we're quickly approaching a state where these algorithms will be breakable. And it seems like every day there's just another breakthrough on that front. So Chris, could you maybe talk about just the state of quantum computing today and what it also means for the state of cryptography today?
Yeah, so quantum computers are good for a lot of different things, but unfortunately, one of the good things that they are also good at is factoring, right? And which is why it becomes a problem for asymmetric cryptography. Quantum computers themselves are not today yet, at least known at the stage and the size where they can real time break RSA keys on the fly and things of the sort. However, there is a lot of line of sight towards that becoming real, sort of in the next, by 2030, by 2035, in that time range, which is why some of the standards are emerging along the timelines that they're emerging. The reality is that there have been, as you said, Ryan, series of announcements ongoing. Right. Every day I wake up to an inbox full of things that are new with quantum computers, be it a chip design or somebody has been able to make a qubit behave a certain way, or even the things that aren't necessarily related to the core qubit. Like, we've got a better way to do error correction, which is something that quantum computers are still prone to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very it's a field that is progressing quickly. And it's progressing faster, I think, than most people are prepared for it to progress from a security standpoint. And that is therefore going to lead us to this uncomfortable spot where cryptography that we use today can and will be broken. When people ask me what the timeline is, very simply, I say I don't know. It's not like Y2K where it was like a date and time and we knew exactly what to look for. It is sometime between now and then. And it's a case of when, not if, which makes it really hard to plan. And one of the reasons we'll talk about some of the strategies around planning. But it's like me asking you, Ryan, hey, how long is a piece of string? Right? It can be any number of answers. We just don't know. But hence why it's got to become really well planned and thought through. I just want to double click too on the fact that you are absolutely correct in saying we have never been through a migration like this. Period. In my 15 plus years, to use your generosity, doing PKI, we've never gone through a full protocol or algorithmic swap out. The closest we probably come is the SHA-1 to SHA-2, but even that was within the RSA, family. We've gone from smaller key size to bigger key size to prevent from hack, which you mentioned, but we've never actually gone from orange juice to cereal, which is kind of what this is, right? It's not two things that are exactly the same, and therefore it's going to be a long learning curve for folks.
Yeah, and you mentioned timeline, right? It's when, not if. So as soon as we say when, it's the question back is, okay, so when is this happening? And like you said, we don't have an answer to that. We certainly have predictions, I think, that get more accurate by the day, but I think, why should I prepare now for quantum computers that will be capable of breaking encryption on the horizon or in the future? People are saying, well, I'm going to be sipping margaritas on a beach. I'm going to be enjoying my 401k. Why should I worry about this now? And it's a valid question. But the answer is that I think change is already underway. The train has left the station. New post-quantum cryptography or PQC algorithms are here. The end of life for current algorithms has already been set. And if we've learned anything from the past, as you mentioned, we know that these changes don't happen overnight. They take years in the making. And it was, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and there's also proof that data is being stolen today to be decrypted later. Which should be a very real concern for organizations today. So there are factors that are today problems for organizations to be starting to make sure that they're not at risk of some future events that could trigger some very negative consequences for them.
Yeah, exactly. So not only do we have a timeline for transition to new algorithms, but as you mentioned, the risk is already real and present. And IBM, we were looking at this, a partner of ours, IBM did a study to assess the state of quantum readiness today. And based on that, they estimated how long is it going to take organizations to fully integrate quantum safe technology. And they estimated, I think it was a little over 12 years. So at the same time, NIST just announced late last year, as many of you may know, as of 2030, RSA and ECC are going to be deprecated, and as of 2035, I believe they'll be disallowed by use or for use by U.S. agencies, and other standards bodies and organizations are following similar timelines. So that's a very short window, considering the 12 years we estimate it's going to take to actually make this transition completely.
Well, and I'll throw one more quick sort of number in there, right? Which is a study from Deloitte that shows about 20 billion connected devices or endpoints on the internet are going to need to be changed or upgraded to mitigate the quantum threat. So we've, as a larger community, right? You've got 12-year timeline. You've got 20 billion things that need to change. That is a massive scale for anybody to even think about. Let alone your chunk of that is going to be very significant to you. But if somebody misses the mark, then things are going to be vulnerable, and you've got to think about it in terms of supply chain and everything else, which we'll sort of talk a little bit more about as we go.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, it's really hard to, and I mean this in the best way possible, really hard to present while I'm looking at the drawing because it's so interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, Chris. And you mentioned earlier SHA-1, SHA-2, can't help but bring that up again, because you mentioned it's a very different scale of migration this time around. Can you maybe speak to that a little? I know we've talked a little bit about different key sizes and the impact that's going to have on performance and things like that.
So let's look at where the commonalities are, right, of that event versus the differences first, right? The commonalities are you can't just migrate from one set of algorithms to the other, especially as it relates to PKI, for instance. And the reason why we're focused on PKI is because of something called Shor's algorithm, that when a suitable quantum computer is available, the algorithm already exists to break asymmetric cryptography. As I said, a quantum computer is very good at factoring primes, as an example, and that's basically what RSA is built on, right? So if I can take the public key and figure out what the private key is, the primes that went into the private key, I can basically recreate the private key, and encryption and everything else is broken. So I mean, the similarities are that you're going to have to build new infrastructure, and that new infrastructure is going to have to be built in a way that it's ready. So there's going to be new HSMs required, new PKI required, new so on and so forth. You're going to have to trust this stuff within the organization. So where we're talking about enterprise PKI as an example, one of the places where organizations had the biggest problem in trusting, in the SHA-1 to SHA-2 migration, was they forgot to trust the new root, and that broke things. So there's root of trust elements that are similar. But what's really different is that it's not just now saying, okay, I'm going to put a new cert on a Windows machine. It's making sure that machine is capable of doing the type of post-quantum cryptography you expect it to do, that both endpoints are able to communicate with each other with the same protocol layers. And then you've got on top of that, things like much larger key sizes and much larger digital signature sizes and things of the sort. And those lend themselves to impact on infrastructure. We already have seen some TLS 1.3 numbers early. AWS did a great study on what the impact and the overhead is of a TLS 1.3 post quantum handshake. Those are things that organizations are going to have to plan for, and make sure they have suitable bandwidth, make sure they have suitable processing power, make sure they have suitable resources to be able to manage with some of those bottlenecks. And then there's other things that just outright break. And it's important to capture those early and make sure that you can capture them, right? So there's multiple different things that need to be looked at. So it's cryptographic libraries at the endpoints. It's the certificates, the size of the certificates. Am I going to take a hybrid approach? Am I going to take a composite approach? Am I going to go post quantum? And then there's a number of different risk elements around the data itself that need to be taken into account. So there's a lot of lifting that we haven't had to do before. Anybody who's heard me on my soapbox, right? We've always treated encryption as a checkbox on an RFP, right? We've never most organizations have never actively managed encryption before. We've said, do you support RSA? Do you support ECC on the RFP? And we've never had to worry about it because it just works. Right. Mm-hmm. And now we're at a point where we can't take that approach anymore, because it's we're going from a bowl of vanilla ice cream, for those of you who are in North America, into a Baskin Robbins, and there's 31 different flavors.
Yeah, and to throw another analogy at you too, we've used this one before of plumbing, right? It's the best and worst analogy of PKI, but it's true. It's that it's really critical. I turn on my tap, I use my washing machine, I hop in the shower, I just expect the water to flow. I expect the connections to work until they don't. And that plumbing's behind the wall. We don't really pay attention to it, but it's critical to our everyday lives until there's a leak or a break in the pipes, or the pipes need to be replaced altogether. Suddenly plumbing's top of mind. And that's certainly going to be something that happens over the next few years as organizations look to rip and replace or upgrade a lot of systems that need to be compatible with this. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges there too. But I think all of that to say, don't hit snooze on your quantum readiness strategy. Don't be PKI admin here. Otherwise, you're going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed and realize that you're late. Not late for work, but late to the quantum game. So on to the next one. Let's talk about what the game plan looks like. Another question I think we often hear is, I mean, if my servers and devices can't support post-quantum standards yet, then where do I even start, or why should I even start? Right? Because the reality is that you can only move as quickly as your vendors and the technology ecosystem that surrounds us does when it comes to implementing PQC in a practical way. But that said, there are very critical steps that must happen before you can even begin going down the road of implementation. Because if you don't have an accurate understanding of where and how cryptography is being used across your organization, how do you know what to prioritize? How do you know what the operational impacts, as Chris was saying, are going to be of migrating from one algorithm to another? So Chris, I mean, you talk about this all the time, right? You need to understand the risk before you can address the risk.
Yeah.
And in the comic book, we position that as building your game plan. So let's talk a bit about that. What does that game plan look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts for those folks who are maybe not as familiar with this space. It starts right now, right? By understanding the problem, understanding what's feeding into this problem space, and trying to just on where things are the same, where things are different, what the operational impacts look like, so on and so forth. And there's tools you can use. Shameless self-promotion, right? We have PQC Labs, which is up on our website, where people can come and play with post-quantum in a test environment, get a cert, see if it's, does it look like a circle, a square, or a triangle type of thing. Understand what some of the sizes are and things of the sort. But that's sort of part of step one. The other part of step one is really getting a handle on what is in your organization and what that looks like. You can't have a game plan if you don't know who the players on the field are going to be, and you can't have a successful outcome if you don't know what the elements are that go into the thought process in the first place. So a lot of that is doing a full analysis and cryptographic discovery inside of your organization, right? Because as I said, there's two ends to this problem, right? It's not just a cert problem. It's also what can consume the cert, how can it consume it? And then you can start, once you've got that, you at least have an idea of, is my organization's landscape, or the problem of this landscape for my organization, how big is it, right? Mm-hmm. How much is going to have to change? And at that point in time, there's a couple of different elements that really need to be taken into account. The first one is, what's my data that's most critical to my organization? Because at the end of the day, this is a risk management problem in a lot of respects, right? So if I've got decent data, understanding of what my data is in my organization, what are the things that I should be protecting first? Great example would be, if you're making missiles for the military, that data has a long shelf life. It's probably very interesting for somebody to steal now and decrypt later, or try to get their hands on. But that's a little bit of an extreme example, right? There's any number of things that your organization considers absolutely the most valuable data-based assets to their organization that they would never want to show anybody on an open website. So the reality is there's a data risk analysis of this that has to come into play as well. You got to marry those two things together then, right? And sort of say, okay, this data lives here. It's being protected by these types of keys today. Let's say it's a web app that's using TLS connections and so on and so forth. As that flows, let's say, from my branch office to my head office, I want to keep that absolutely secure and know that's secure. Now that's the infrastructure that maybe I go and look at, okay, how do I update that to post-quantum or to some hybrid of classical and post-quantum and undertake that piece of it, right? Every organization is going to have a slightly different plan here, right? And you're going to need to sort of pick them off one by one, because you're not going to be able to do this in a large whole scale, send everybody home for a couple of years and come back to the office and say, we're post quantum. It's just not.
Hey, I'll take you up on that offer.
Yeah, well, we can negotiate later. Beach margaritas, you kind of got me in that mood earlier. But the other part of it is that you're going to want to slot this into things that happen organically and naturally in your organization as well, right? So you want to look at things like, hey, there's a natural cycle for hardware replacement or software updates, so on and so forth. This is where you have to really engage with your vendor community to find out what their plans are, what they're planning to support. The example I use all the time is, you've got data in cloud, you've got data on-prem, you got data in mobile devices, you got data everywhere. It's really important to understand that entire ecosystem as it pertains to security. If I make my organization post-quantum, right, and forget about the fact that I'm doing, let's say, backups to the cloud, but they're only protected with RSA, then I've not protected that data, plain and simple. So it's really important to take all of these little points in time into consideration, and to put the right team around you. That is going to be key. This is not a PKI person problem, right? This is not PKI guys problem. This is not PKI admins problem. This is an organizational problem that leads itself to risk, and it's going to require a multifunctional team in order to be successful. It's looking at the drawing, right? We look at the sort of football analogy, right? You can't just have quarterbacks on the field throwing balls at each other. That's not going to help you move to the next yard line and move the ball forward, right? You can't just have defense on the team or defense on the field all the time, because you also need some offensive players. You need the support on the sidelines, right? You need the coaches, you need the owner, and then you need the league, right? And for us, the league is the ecosystem, the village. It will take a lot of people cooperating together in order to make this successful, not only within your organization, but also by your chosen vendors. We work, you mentioned IBM. There's a number of other organizations, Taluses of the world and the Quintinuums and people like that are all parts of the solution, that all have to work together to help the organization do this effectively in a shortened timeline, and by making sure that our things work together, and we're not figuring that out in your environment, but we're figuring that out before coming into your environment. So there's multiple different elements and answers, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of moving parts, and hence why it's going to take organizations so long to address this. And what organizations are going to have to do is a significant amount of work, but you can't do it without a plan. If you just start doing it, you're going to end up just constantly spinning and going nowhere. You have to have a plan that involves everybody, and everybody is bought into, and the team is running from the same playbook.
Yeah, and it goes to the race analogy too, right? The comic book we called A Race Against Quantum Time. That's the reality that we face. It's kind of funny, Matt. I'm watching you. You're racing against time too to draw as quickly as you can. I'm amazed at what you can do in such a short time. But I'd have maybe one of those lockers drawn by now.
I don't even think I'd have the X's and O's in the background by now. So.
It's the coloring that takes forever, and the sketching, and especially with these angles. But I'm getting to get there.
No, it's awesome. It looks great. But it is a race, but races don't start at the start line, right? They start way before. There's training involved, there's preparation, all of the work that goes into even just showing up at that start line. There's a significant amount that goes into that, the race or the move to the, I guess, hypothetical finish line is the smaller aspect of it. Although theoretically, there really is no finish line, right?
Theoretically, in automobile racing or motorcycle racing, right, the end part is participating on the day,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the result is the result, but it's all the prep work, like you said, that went into it, right? The building of the car, the engineering, the testing, the hundreds of laps that you do, the wind tunnel testing, the compliance pieces that you do to make sure your car is suitable for that event. Learning the track, practicing over and over again, conditioning of the driver. Making sure that the team management is in sync with what's happening at the racetrack. There's so many elements that when you show up on race day, you think that that's the start line, but it's actually the end result of all the work that went into getting you there in the first place. And it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
I'm a car guy, as you know, Ryan, so that one resonated with me.
Yeah, I knew it would. Another plug, we talked about sipping margaritas on the beach. You can join us at Tech Days in Miami next week if you want. But most of you, if you have already, you're probably registered. But our annual conference is actually next week, and we've got an F1 theme to it. So I'm really excited for that. We'll be diving into topics just like this one and more. So I'm really looking forward to that. Chris, you've got a few discussions, a panel, and a few other areas that we'll be digging into. So cool. All right, on to the next one. Matt, feel free, by the way, to continue drawing this one. Don't feel like you need to rush to the next. But this is an important topic for us, right? It's the not just the game plan, but the team. You talked about this, Chris. We all know that we can shout from the rooftops, quantum's coming, like some doomsday prophet. But if there's not buy-in from the top down, then it's just not happening. And this is tough, I think, because explaining PKI and certificates to a non-technical person is hard enough. But now throw post-quantum cryptography in the mix, and it can feel near impossible. But building that business case and the awareness at the board level is essential, right, Chris?
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. There's a question in the in the questions here, coming back to the specifically the harvest now, decrypt later. But the reality is, the way things have progressed in the last 6 months, we've gone from talk of standards to having standardized algorithms that we can actually now implement in a standardized way. We've gone from eventually RSA is going to get deprecated to very solid dates about when it's going to get deprecated and when it's completely disallowed out of NIST again. We've gone from roadmap thought to actual products that can start to do post-quantum. I mean, if you're running a Chrome browser, Chromium, is capable now of doing post-quantum. There's been a lot of work and development in a very short amount of time, so that people do have options today, right? And while there's, I think it's a little premature for organizations to say we're going end to end. Maybe outside of specific military channels or things like that, we're going end to end post quantum today. There is a reasonable number of things that organizations can do to start making sure that they're okay, right? Look at how you're protecting your data. Look at how you are using standardized things. This is really not a good time to sort of go off the. This is the any salesperson who comes in and says, "Well, we built post-quantum cryptography that can't be broken, and it's not standardized and it hasn't been tested," is somebody you want to get out of your office about as quickly as you possibly can right now, because that's just a world of hurt. Because there are these standardized algorithms. So it is absolutely critical to get everybody brought around into this, and it's hard to get the attention of the board in particular when the board is buzzing about, let's say, AI, or they're still trying to figure out malware, as it relates to threats and things like that. And you're sort of sitting there at the door going, "Hey, post-quantum's coming. Quantum, what are we doing about it?" The good news is, though, I mean, first and foremost, I have seen some shifts at board level to actually acknowledge this problem. Banking is definitely at the forefront of leading this, the drive, if you will. Shortly behind that, I would say, obviously, government, military, defense contractors. In addition to that, healthcare and things like that. If you think again, right, people who have long data that is very critical to their organization or to their customers and has a long lifetime. It absolutely is starting to get the attention. But if you're, for organizations, how to drive that attention can be a challenge. There's a couple of different ways that I've seen it effectively driven. The first one is just to sit everybody down and say, okay, you know what, this is what post-quantum is, because most people don't have a good understanding of the relationship between quantum computing and cryptography, and how prevalent cryptography is used in the organization. Again, because it's just been a checkbox on an RFP. So that's one good way, and certainly, happy to help with that and participate with it. The other, part is start looking at, hey, if we know RSA is going to get deprecated, how long are my products going to support that for, right? And what's my time to change everything in my ecosystem? I can take it from a deprecation element and sort of say, okay, by 2030 or 2035, these protocols are no longer going to be supported. Let me work backwards from that point and show to my board why we need to undertake this now, right? And there's some numbers that you can throw in there, to sort of speak the financial language that sort of says, hey, we know that if you're going to have to replace your HSMs, there's going to be a bottleneck in the supply chain for, just the pure hardware stuff, right? So it's going to get a lot more expensive the closer you get to those dates, because the supply is going to become tighter and tighter. So all of these things are tools that you can use. I personally have been talking to some folks that in the cybersecurity, cyber insurance space, that there's sort of some talk about how cyber security and cyber risk protection, right, and quantum are going to play together, right? Because if you don't do anything and all your data is going to get exposed or is at risk of being exposed, is that something you really want to underwrite from an insurance standpoint, knowing that again, it's a when, not if standpoint. So all of these things kind of are coming in, and there's ways to put that conversation together. But I think that the number one way to do it is just to educate, hey, here's what's going on in this space. Here's why it's important to this organization. Here's a timeline that's already established. And this is what it means to our organization and the risk that we're at for doing nothing. And that's what sort of the approach that I've seen used most often. And if you happen to be, for instance, going to RSA this year, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of conversation around those strategies, and for organizations where that's already worked. And you even mentioned Tech Days, right? We have a presenter that is talking specifically to that type of approach, that what worked within their organization. So we can learn from others as well, right? We don't have to go on our own as well.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on a few things there. I mean, number one, of course, is just getting, we're using this team analogy, the coach, making sure that they're bought in, or even the team owner, being the CEO. But it's definitely not a solo sport. You do need a team to make it happen. Just like football, American football, I should say. We've got a global audience. We need a quarterback, right? Whether you've got a dedicated PKI certificate cryptography team, they come by different names, or it's just a function of a role within security. But that individual or that team, again, they can't do it alone, because while the team that manages PKI and cryptography and certificates may understand algorithms, protocols, identities, that's really only half the battle. The other half is understanding how to practically implement that. And every business unit, every application owner has their own unique workflows, their own processes, their own technologies that they know better than anyone else. So you've got this combination of expertise, right, in PKI and cryptography and in the applications that these people work with day in and day out. And it's that cross-functional combination of those two skill sets that I think is needed. Gartner's referred to that. I think you mentioned this as a cryptographic center of excellence, a CCOE. They've also referred to it as a machine identity working group. Chris, I wouldn't say we've seen that in like a formalized cross-functional working group in many organizations, although we are seeing more movement in that direction. But I'm interested to hear maybe a little more on your perspective of like, how are you seeing that cross-functional activity happening in the organizations that you're talking to?
Well, I mean, once you've got the buy-in, right, and the buy-in can come in two different forms, right? There's sort of the we're gonna budget for everything over the next 10 years and make it a mega project, right? But a lot of organizations are having a little bit more success in sort of doing it from a smaller incremental standpoint, which is, hey, if we all acknowledge this thing is eventually going to be a risk, is now a good time to figure out how big the risk is for our organization. So let's focus on doing that inventory piece, for instance, as a first step. And that makes it more bite-sized pieces for people to bite off on. We are definitely seeing the emergence of the cryptographic center of excellence type of team, whether they call it that or not. More so than the machine identity type of teams and things like that. Because really, if you're going to deal with this sort of cryptographic migration, identity is a subset of it. Application owners are a subset. The person who runs F5s, is a subset of it, so on and so forth. And a lot of it is just once you kind of got that inventory, you know who to go and talk to, right? You know who your application owners are, and you can let them know there's a change coming, right? And basically, you can invite them to the table. Or, if you're not at the table, we're going to start making some decisions that you may not love, but are going to have to happen anyways, right? And while that's playing a little bit of hardball, the reality is that is what is ultimately going to happen, right? You're running SAP, you're running this application stack. I'd love to talk to your support people over there and find out what their post-quantum roadmap looks like, and then start building on top of that. And when people realize that the change is inevitable, they do come and sit at the table, for the bits that they are most interested in, right? I mean, and that's the other part. So you get little working groups, and then you get a group of working groups together, and so on and so forth. And it's looking at, again, I'm watching Matt draw too. To sort of bring it back, right? The quarterback may make a play, but the quarterback doesn't just run the ball all the time, right? It's not a one person type of approach. It's everybody understanding what the end result is to win the game, and then the series of steps that go into that end result, which are sort of play by play, motion by motion. You're going to have the occasional fumble. You're going to have the occasional interception. It's going to happen. But if you've got the right game plan and you know who the opponent is, you're in a much better spot to be able to execute the right plays to get the outcome that you want. But no game is won by throwing the ball once and running down the field, catching it, and then going, okay, you guys do what you want for the next 3 quarters.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Love this, by the way. Gotta love the Keyfactor K on the helmet too. That's a nice touch, Matt. But yeah, I mean, it's a great analogy, right? This team sport, building the game plan, understanding that you need buy-in from all aspects, and that again, like you said, Chris, presented in man zone and hoping for the best.
I think Ryan, we're getting some interference.
Yeah, let me switch my audio. Sorry about that.
So it's also a comment was made about going back to passwords and paper ledgers and pigeons, and I think that extreme is avoidable. Although I love the idea behind it, in a simplistic way. But it does also bring up that this is not just still getting background noise there, right?
I'm muted. That may be coming from you, Matt, if you don't mind. I don't know if you're already muted, but it might be coming from your audio there. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan,
His computer's working. His computer's working overtime to keep up with the design, I think.
Yeah.
that fan's like a jet engine.
Yeah. We'll have to put them in a cooling changer like a quantum computer.
Yeah, there we go. Nice transition, Chris. So let's round it out then. Let's wrap up the discussion. Again, our favorite buzzword, crypto agility, but it's more than a buzzword. It's certainly something that is on the minds of us at Keyfactor, but organizations as a whole, because like we've said, quantum readiness, it's not an end state. The reality is that there's no finish line. It's about continuously adapting to change. This isn't the first change we're seeing. It certainly won't be the last. And even if we look at this change, like the first set of algorithms we have in hand, there will be more algorithms to come, right? And there are already some in progress, FNDSA being one of them. So, Chris, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, right? And there's still a lot of unknown unknowns, right? And I can't emphasize enough what you just said, right? It's not a one and done. This is not a let's go from A to B. This could be let's go from A to B to D, back to C, over to F, so on and so forth. And so, we got to take that into account, because we don't, well, the theory is there behind these new algorithms, right? You don't know what you don't know until you can actually slam them with Shor's algorithm at a quantum pace. So a lot of these new algorithms are based on problems that we suspect that are going to be hard for quantum computers to solve, right? Lattice-based network or lattice-based cryptography and things of the sort. But we just don't know, right? Look at the first set of candidates that was released, right? One of them was broken by a classical computer inside of minutes of them being published, right? So we went through all this exercise of vetting this wonderful thing, and somebody forgot to use like a 386 with Windows 95 on it to see if it would actually break it. There's those types of situations that are going to come into play. You mentioned FDSA, the Falcon algorithms. They're supposed to be out coming up. They serve a different set of use cases that will come into play. And I think what's really also going to be drive crypto agility here is not just the fact that I've got vanilla or chocolate, right? I've got all of these different flavors of algorithms that the core ones are going to be like the MLDSAs and those core ones that are standardized now. But the reason why there's 14 more candidates going through consideration is because there's fringe cases, there's edge cases that are going to have to be used, right? If I've got an IoT device that isn't capable of taking the large key size from an MLDSA algorithm, I'm going to have something that is quantum safe with a smaller key size, as an example. So there's going to be a lot of change and flexibility that's going to need to be built into the next generation of PKI and just cryptography in general. The ability to swap out keys, the ability to use different algorithms dynamically, and as I said, that now comes into also managing the two ends, right? It's not just RSA bigger key size. It's now I'm going to move from MLDSA to FDSA or something like that, which is going to require a change at both ends of that spectrum. So, it really does require organizations to start actively managing cryptography as a critical asset versus just do we have it, yes or no, and understand what that active management is. And even if all estimates are wrong, right? And I'll go back to this. Let's say the quantum computer literally self-implodes and never actually gets around to, breaking RSA, hypothetically. You're still going to be able to use that same infrastructure for the day-to-day care and feeding of the certificates you already have. The ones that are expiring right now while you're on this webinar. Things like that. Different key lengths that come up, all of those use cases from the original PKI problems that you're still rushing around, run around a field in circles trying to figure out which goal line is yours. And it's absolutely going to be that same foundation that you can continue to build upon. So agility is an ongoing requirement. Right. If we just think back to that 47-day cert problem, right? You're going to have to update your certs every 47 days on all of your public facing SSL or TLS, web servers, web services, so on and so forth. You're not going to be able to do that with just humans anymore, right? Most organizations have a few hundred publicly faced or rooted SSL certs or TLS certs that they're using for various different critical business applications and public facing things, right? That alone is going to require a level of agility. So while quantum is a huge uplift and needs to be taken into account, the reality is you've still got the problems today from the original PKI problems that if you have not taken agility into account, you're probably fighting your battle now on multiple fronts. Right. And that's just going to make it even more difficult to get everybody's attention to look at the quantum thing, right? Because you can't really go into a board meeting and talk intelligently about post-quantum when, all your certs are expiring, your Wi-Fi's down.
Yeah. And I think a key piece of the agility message too is just agility brings a lot of words to mind, like speed and adaptiveness and things like that. But really, I think when it comes to the business level, it's the ability to move quickly and in an agile way, but without disrupting operations. That's the key piece of it, right? I mean, we can adapt, but to adapt without disrupting is going to be the challenge here, given the short window that we have. And again, like you've said, we've faced that many times. Crypto agility, we've been using that term for many years now because it's already been applicable to a lot of situations, including shorter certificate lifespans for TLS certs, for public facing certs. The lifespan of those has been shrinking for years now. I mean, I think, Chris, it used to be the last, I think it was 7, then down to 5, then down to 2 and 1.
5, 3, 1, and now we're going to go from 1 to there's a chart in the proposal at the CAB forum that takes us from 398 days down to 47 days between now and 2029. So if we just stop and think about that, right? We've got 2029, which is the shorter lifespan. We've got 2029, 2030, that is the deprecation of RSA. We've got all of these things that are sort of creating this perfect storm of operational a requirement for operational excellence around certificates in order to protect our organization and to minimize risk for the data that those certificates do secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we've seen trends even regardless of standards. I mean, Let's Encrypt very recently came out with their 6-day certificate announcement. So the lifespan of these certs is ranging from now years to weeks to days to hours. We've got ephemeral workloads that many of our customers are issuing these certs to that last a matter of hours or even just minutes. So yeah, the volume and the speed at which certificates are being leveraged, I think, only continues to grow. And being able to handle that is going to be essential. And it also sets you up for success for a major migration like this when you have those processes in place for visibility, for automation, and ensuring that your systems can support these new algorithms. But with that, we've got a few questions here. One funny comment. I guess we should start breeding our pigeons, Chris, or start a pigeon farm, because I like this one. It looks like to avoid the quantum AI problem, we're going to go back to passwords on paper ledger and pigeons to send messages across the country. So that's great. But I'm not sure how scalable that solution is, but certainly big challenges ahead that do pose serious questions about.
And I do want to call out Matt here, because it just occurred to me that the placement of the number 42 and your previous Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference is an absolutely great tie-in.
Nice.
Anybody got that at all?
That's great.
That's okay.
Somebody else out there got that.
Yeah. I've got my towel over here, so we're all good.
Nice. Grab your towel and dive in.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I've got one more question here, and happy to stick around for questions as Matt, you wrap up. We've got 2 more minutes as we close, but I do have a pretty big question here, Chris. The problem we're experiencing is that we do understand the urgency. However, we do not know how much time, effort, and skills this would cost just to take stock of where we use vulnerable crypto. Any suggestions?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to assign any of those unless you have, first of all, clear visibility of where vulnerable crypto exists in your organization. So that is kind of the starting point. The reality is it's going to cost, and again, I can't talk to your specific organization, but take into account new hardware, new cryptographic libraries and software, time to recode that software as required. It's going to take, new certificates and new PKI, so on and so forth. And all of those things are going to be important and critical. And the reality is that you can't get a handle on how much it's going to cost or what the effort's going to be until you've got that baseline to work from. And then from there are some cost models that you can apply, right? You know how much your public certs are costing you. For instance, you can get quotes today on what it's going to cost for hardware replacement, for PKI replacement, things like that. Those are definitely important elements to look at.
Absolutely.
And Glenn, if you're coming to Tech Days, down is on me.
I was going to say, Glenn, I'm reaching out to you. Just for the rest of the audience, Glenn commented there's an RFC to use pigeons for messages. So gotta love it. All right. So with that, thank you, Matt, first of all, for following along with us, racing along really to really bring our conversation to life. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation with you as well, Chris. Just as we wrap up, I'm going to take over the screen real quick, Matt. Just want to let everyone know that you can get access to the comic book. Again, it's in the attachments tab. It dives into a lot of the topics that we talked about today, and even deeper. And then feel free to go check out our original comic book that may be in the attachments as well, but certainly on our website. And it's a great read too. So again, thank you everyone for joining.
And don't forget the PQC labs too, if you want to go and play with some of this stuff.
Yes, yeah, we've got a free sandbox that you can actually try for 30 days in Azure. If you go to keyfactor.com/postquantum cryptography lab, you can find that there, and we've got lots of other assets available there as well. So again, thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.